Hi everybody, and welcome back to Open Source Tonight. So I have this relatively affordable system. It's less than $200, at least pre-tariffs. Not going to get into the politics of that past that, but just to clarify, if you're in the US, the tariff situation could complicate the pricing of this item. But you could get like a used system off eBay, which honestly, for a lot of people, that's all you need. So maybe just go eBay. But anyway, however you get it, you can get a cheap system and you can build out all kinds of stuff. I've got a DNS server for my network. I have got a web server where I can host like all kinds of internal applications. It's running Nginx, the web server. So I've got all kinds of different stuff. But what's really interesting about this is the way I'm architecting all this is a very modern way of doing things. And I'm a little slow to the trend because everybody else has been doing this stuff for a while, actually. But I am using Docker containers, or just containers now, for a lot of different things. And so I have got, this is talking about my server setup. I've got a Docker container called Nginx Proxy Manager. This lets you proxy other web services, and we'll explain what that is in a minute here. But the very quick 10,000 feet level, which is probably actually all I'll really explain because that's what you need, is a web application. A lot of modern ones, like in Python or in something like, anybody heard of Node.js, something like that, they will produce a web server themselves, and then you can proxy that server. A lot of times those servers are not designed to go public facing directly, right? It's almost like an API server, right? Where I will talk to you and then somebody else talks to me being, in this case, Nginx, the web server. And Nginx is used a lot in the world of websites because it can proxy systems like that. And so it's very powerful. So I've got the Nginx proxy server doing that. I've got a Jellyfin server that it proxies. So if you go to, for example, jellyfin.vincentmaggard.com, this won't work for you. But it will for me because I'm on my internal network. I have an internal DNS server everything connects to, including things like my Roku box on the TV. And so even with the Jellyfin app on the Roku, as far as it's concerned, it mysteriously works with jellyfin.vincentmaggard.com. It's not really very mysterious at all. I have the DNS server set to map directly to an internal IP address. And then that internal IP address obviously has the Docker container, again, sound familiar, doesn't it, of Jellyfin. That Docker container itself is then connected to the Nginx proxy manager, and that's how that I can get it to resolve that domain. I can even have it do HTTPS traffic if I want my traffic encrypted. But for the internal network, just sharing, my stuff, like my movies and my podcasts. Honestly, I use Jellyfin an awful lot to watch video podcasts. But, movies or whatever you put on there. And so I've got a bunch of different stuff, like I said, in the server. In addition to the things I've already listed, there are some other really interesting things that I have put inside of the server. I do some WordPress development for like customers that have WordPress sites. I have an actual development installation of WordPress in a Docker container. And so I have my own little WordPress that I can play with. I don't need internet or anything, and I can test whatever I want, and I don't have to worry about breaking something, right? You developers out there, testing before you put it in production is not a half bad idea. Anyway, but my point is that I've got that. Let's see, what else have I got in there? I'm doing this list off memory, so I apologize. I may very well forget something. I have to put it in the description or something, but there's a bunch of stuff. Let's see. I have an RSS reader. That's a good one. So I can actually look at RSS feeds and I can see all kinds of stuff. I have an RSS feed on opensourcetonight.com. And so if you go to that RSS feed, there's an actually RSS button at the bottom of the page. That will be updated automatically every time I put a new YouTube video out and put it up on the website. And so if you do not want to use YouTube for some reason to watch these videos, you can go to my website. We don't use YouTube for the vast majority of the videos anymore. And then, not only that, but how are you going to know when there's a new video? Well, how you know is you subscribe to that RSS feed with an RSS feed reader. The one I use is really nice. It runs in a Docker container, produces its own web interface. And on that web interface, I can pull that up and it will show me all these different feeds, and it checks them. I think the default's once an hour. So, it's not going to be instant when the video is posted, but you'll get a general idea. And so it gives you a decentralized way of being able to know when the videos are available. So that's something I can do that's really interesting. Another thing that I've got on the server is this is actually my box that I use to push out media to the CDN, which eventually powers vincentmaggard.com and opensourcetonight.com's video playback. So if you didn't understand about this, we're just going to go into inside baseball for just a minute here because it's going to be very rambly today. But the videos are encoded into AV1. I'm experimenting with VP9 and a few other things as well, but AV1 is like the official main video format. Every video is always an AV1. Others may occasionally be an additional codec or two just for testing purposes or something, at least for now. But what happens is that needs to be encoded. So AV1 I do on the CPU because there is encoders for GPUs, but I don't have any of those. And I have to say, if you use SVT AV1, done a previous video, on that topic, it can encode pretty quick. So this little mini PC server, I have a script that I wrote in Bash that gives me all the different resolutions, automatically scales everything, preserves the aspect ratio of the image, all that important stuff. This isn't a Docker container, but it's on the server. And what happens is, this specific software that I have developed, again, it's basically just a really big Bash script. I can give it a video ID. I can go in and I can say, look, here's the master, the video master, and that file will have audio, have video, and then I have a captions file that's called captions.scc. That's what it's always called. These are all in a specific folder for each video, and I point the script at that folder, and then I just say, the second thing I do is say, here's the video ID. Right? That is the ID that you use on the player on the website to pull it up. It's a combination of random letters and numbers, and there's never two videos on the site that uses the exact same group of zeros and ones and, well, it wouldn't be zeros, well, binary it would, but you know what I mean. So that's how I do all of that. So again, that server does that too. And the really cool part about this script that I've set up is it automatically uploads everything to the CDN as soon as it's done encoding it. So I can start this up and walk away. Another thing this server does for me is it lets me edit my Hugo sites. So I use Hugo, the static site generator, to produce several of my websites, including vincentmager.com, opensourcetonight.com, as well as a few others actually, but those are the main ones. So those two sites, because I am using Hugo is not like WordPress where it's actually dynamic, it's static if you didn't know. Well, that means I have to produce all these static files and push them up to a server. So my server it's basically just a Linux box that I can SSH into and easily add a page or anything. I've got all these templates set up and everything. I did a whole video on that, so you can check that out as well. I'll reference that. But the point is that I have that system set up to do Hugo as well, and I can automatically add a video. I can even have it scheduled the way I have it set up with a cron task, and it will automatically at the right time add a video, push that change up to my the hosting system that I use for the website, which is actually through a company called DigitalOcean. And anyway, it will automatically update the site through Git. Anyway, everybody, I don't know what else I can think of right now that's on the server. That's like the main stuff. There may be a few other things that I'm forgetting right now, but I would just say Docker is really interesting. I'm going to do some videos on Docker in the future. It's very powerful. And so if you haven't got into Docker, if you're like me and it's, you're a little behind the times, it works, I can just do things outside of Docker, right? Well, it's very, very nice, and it's so easy for me to update them. It is so easy for me to, the different Docker containers, so easy for everything to be updated. And it, knock on wood, always seems to just work. You know what I mean? Like you're not having to deal with, I have to get all these different dependencies and all this, and this one didn't work. I have to manually edit this config file. Usually with most of my Docker containers, I use Docker Compose. And with Docker Compose, what I do is inside of the Docker Compose, it's a file, a YAML file. And you go in and there's a template and you paste it in there. Almost every project has one. And then you adjust the settings in there to what you want. Maybe you want a different default password or who knows what. And once you get all that set up, again, a future video will be about this in detail that I'm going to do. But once you get all that set up, then you can just do Docker space compose space up in that directory where you've got that, and you're done. So I make a separate directory for every single Docker container to store its data, to store its config, all of that right there. And then what I do on top of all that stuff is I have, well, hey, I want Docker Compose, but I want to run this automatically. I know there's other ways to do this, but I like systemd. I know, controversial opinion in the world of Linux, I think, even now, but I like systemd. So how do I do it? I use a systemd service. I write my own service description file, my own service configuration file. And in that file, I literally tell it, go into this directory, right? And then run Docker space compose space up. And by doing that, I can have systemd do that. Then you can use the systemd service to auto start with the systemctl space enable space service to do that on startup. I did a whole video on system D services as well. So shameless self-promotion of something else I've talked about, right? But the point is, there is a bunch of stuff that I have talked about before related to this topic. And anyway, my point is that I run them as system D services. So as soon as the box boots up, let's say I turned it off for an update, or rebooted it for an update, you know, the actual Linux system update, they automatically come back. Additionally to that, if I was, for example, to have a power loss or something, you know, eventually it will come back. I don't currently have the server on a UPS. I have a UPS, but I don't have it on this system right now. But again, in future, I'm either going to put it on a UPS, or what I'd really like to do is build a solar system. Anyway, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a nice, long, rambly. Servers are cool, and I have lots to talk about. I could easily talk about this for 30 straight minutes, probably. I don't know if anybody would actually want to hear 30 straight minutes, but I'm tempted to do that version of this video someday, so stay tuned for that one. But everybody, I thank you so much for watching Open Source tonight, and until next time, everybody, goodbye.
And action.